go through with that. Okay, so that is like a potential tailwind, right? We're also now at a time where we're looking at interest rates have been higher than in recent history. I know that you could probably look at it over the long term and say, well, 6% is the average over the last 30 or 40 years. But I would hope if interest rates did fall within the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, that would be a potential tailwind. And all these things make a huge difference. A 1% change in interest rates decreases the debt service by $500,000. That's significant. So I only share that to say that, I am cautiously optimistic that, we have some tailwinds, including fair funding that would, and also the charter tuition that would save us approximately $300,000. So there are a lot of things in the proposal that would be strong tailwinds for us. So I am cautiously optimistic. And then what I wanted to open this meeting up with to start the discussion is just a simple prompt and question is to the board is, what additional information might you need to make a decision to move forward with the project in March?
Project meaning the middle school project?
Correct. Based on our discussions, it seems to me as if, and thanks, I should have clarified that the middle school is priority. In the surveys that we've taken and taken a look at the facility study, the middle school is the building in most need. If we're going to tend to the building in most need, we'd do that first. So go ahead, Warren.
Now, do we want to, before we answer that question as a board, do we want to go to ask for public comment?
There's no public.
Anybody out there that's working for us, I'd like to make a public comment.
Just checking. Just.
Hear that nobody wanted to say anything.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh, they want to say something.
Karen, I see your hand up.
Okay, Jess?
Yep.
Covering the ground. Go ahead.
So what additional information might you need to make a decision in March? Can I?
I've got lots of
Go ahead.
questions. I need to be assured as a board that we are understanding the study that KCBA did for us, understanding that by us borrowing $90 million that we are fulfilling issues, whether it's safety, space, compliance with all of our buildings. And I just need to be assured that the renovations of the elementary buildings are also creating space, because all of our elementary buildings, except for Clark Summit, has major space issues. They have safety issues. And so if we are going to do this, I just need to be assured that, for 20, 30, 40 years from now, we're not going back and saying, oh, wow, we didn't do the things that were really in our study to make sure that we are doing the best we can for kids 40 years from now. And I'm a big proponent on thinking that we are in the age where we need to have an all-day kindergarten. I just believe that our culture now is just in that state. And by us doing the renovations to these elementary buildings, are we ensuring enough space to be able to house that? And is our enrollment going to go up? I just need those answers. So I feel, because I am 100% behind all of this, but I just want to make sure we're doing this in the best for our community for the next 40 years.
Can you actually specify, it doesn't have to be right now, because you mentioned that the board doesn't
might not understand the KCBA study. And I personally don't feel that way, but I do understand that the KCBA highlighted things that have been, that the district has failed to accomplish or failed to fund over 20 years. So we are playing quite some catch up in terms of remedying those issues. So what I would like to see is, you mentioned priorities being class size, right? But we have ADA compliance issues as well. And so when we discuss like reno, I believe we're discussing doing those baseline to make sure the kids are healthy, and that the buildings are, how did you describe it, Chris, or Dr. Schaefer? Like with the light renos, it was going to be rugs, existing walls are still there.
Yeah, keep the walls up and just the fixtures and take out the carpet, put in floors, lights, mechanicals.
Right, so that's not gonna change if we're not changing walls, we're not gonna change class size. And I'm not sure that that is on the table based on the financial projections we have. So perhaps, creating a list of what you want to be sure we're addressing, because I support all-day kindergarten as well. The financial projections we've been given, and the list we've been given, we cannot afford that. So where we're at is prioritizing that list, the middle school being, I think, everyone's number one priority. And my concern is making sure that we continue to renovate the middle school, right? Because we will have, with this budget, we will have a building that we can either approve light reno on, though we think that that might not be a great investment, or we can discuss moving forward in 2030, maybe 2032, based on the projections we have with the tax structure we have in place. For the 90 million, we may be able to approach that phase 2 then. So I just would like to know, when you're saying I want to be assured that we're approaching these things from the facility study, to me, the most important parts of the index that they had given us on our score were, the baseline, how to live in a building, how to live in, or how to, be educated in a building that's up to date. Whereas safety and security, those will be included, but we're not going to be able to do some of the major safety renovations that probably need to be done, as far as I know. Correct? Like vestibule changes and things like that that we've discussed. So.
Are you anticipating our enrollment growing in the next 20 years?
If you can answer that, I have a Powerball ticket I want you to fill out for me too.
Yeah, so we've beaten all of the initial enrollment projections, or close to it, but not by a ton. What I would say, because we don't know that. We can take a look at the birth rates like they do and make some projections. What I've said publicly before, and I feel as if it is a trend that will continue, is that the state in the IU that we are in have decreased in enrollment, right? Somewhere around 7 to 9%, right? We are growing at around 2%. I do feel that, when I arrived here, we had 146 students that were in mostly cyber charters. They're in that charter space. We've got approximately 80 to 90 that are homeschooled, right? Now we have approximately 90 students that are in charters, predominantly cyber charters. I do feel, and I won't know until the end of this year, that will start to decrease as that starts to work its way out. So I do not see any reason to project decreases in enrollment. I also do not see any large residential neighborhoods going up that would lead me to believe. Now, let's just say, and this is a hypothetical, let's just say something happened out and someone bought, out Newton Ransom, 200 acres, and they're like, hey, we want to put up this community where there's going to be 100 homes. Well, then that would really change things for us. Certainly when I look around, particularly in that area, Newton Ransom and whatnot, there's a lot of land. It's not being developed right now. So these are things that we don't control. I can tell you, I was just looking for the numbers, but I can get that, Maggie. I was trying to go in there and find the document that I had.
Tell me what document.
The kindergarten one. I will tell you, like on the all-day K, and taking a look at that, that's something that would be very nice to have, but it would also mean that I don't think we could do any building projects because we're talking about somewhere close to 8 to 12 teachers, even more. And, we're talking about a lot more building as a space, or if you're not building more space, right, in your existing schools, then what you're really talking about, and again, this is like a hypothetical, but I'm answering your question, is redistricting in such a way that you would be, turning one elementary into, say, like a full day K, and then moving kids around, but you're not really creating more space. Our average class size in the district is about 275. We have a couple 300s, those are anomalies, but 275. And our current kindergartners, I'll pull it out, is probably around 220, something like that. And that's because, the remainder usually are paying for some full day K. So we'd have that more coming in. So
I guess my question is, are you comfortable with this size, the capacity size of all of our elementary buildings right now for our K through 4 elementary students? Are you comfortable with the way each one of the elementary buildings are structured to house that K through 4 group? And are you comfortable with that for the next 20, 30 years? Because when we do these renovations and we do this, this is setting us up for the next 30 years. And, I need to hear from the academians if you're comfortable with keeping those spaces in those classrooms where they are, elementary levels.
right. No, I am. I can tell you that I'm comfortable for at least the next 10 years as we're like looking at these projects. Certainly there will be some tailwinds. This is why the Waverly is the tightest, okay? And that's evident in the study when you look at square foot per student, right? So we'll take a quantitative look at it. Like that's, right? And there is a proposal that would get you a couple more rooms. Whether you do that or not, it's another thing. But in Waverly, already had to be redistrict. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with that. What we've talked about and what Mike from KCBA has talked about the middle school is that we are undersized here. And part of the work that is proposed at the middle school is kind of right sizing things. So to give you an example, I believe the high school is around 200,000 square feet. In this elementary or in this middle school is like 144,000 square feet, somewhere around there. And they're not too far off each other enrollment wise. So there's a little bit of right sizing. At the high school, there was a proposal in there about a STEM space addition. Well, that's an addition, but it also creates, because you would be moving the old science rooms, it also creates room for like 8 new classrooms. So when we think about the space, we're good that way. But again, like I said in the beginning, if a new development springs up, then we'll be having a different conversation. But that's a good conversation to have, because you know that you've got additional revenue coming in and things like that. And we know from our architects have told us, like, hey, Newton Ransom is probably the easiest and most probable to add on to if you were in a space where you had to do that land wise, what it looks like. Good.
So I think if you look forward, like, it's great to think about like the next 20 years, but you really just have to prepare for what is a very reasonable growth rate today. It could be that we grow a lot faster than that. And if we do, we'll react to it at some point in the future, right? So like, I think one of the advantages of building the beginning of a new middle school here is that at least for a while, you're creating half of a school here, and you still have this, I know nobody wants this, but you still have this space. And whether you, and we talked about this in the facilities committee meeting tonight, if you start the design and the build of the beginning of a new middle school, you maintain the optionality for a while to either lightly renovate this and live with it, do a real heavy renovation, which KCBA, that was one of their options, and live with it. Or, hey, maybe a lot of tailwinds happen. Maybe interest rates fall. Maybe the reassessment makes developers, start developing like mad in the Abingtons, and we have a lot of growth in our revenues that we didn't expect. And then in a few years, we can actually build 3 additional grades and have this be a 5-grade building and move 4th grade out of elementary schools and create space. So I think that there's a lot of optionality that you have. You don't have to front load out everything is what I'm trying to get at, right? And I want to front load it too. Like I'd love to have, but just to answer from my perspective, Dr. Schaefer, you said that what do we need to move forward? Like I'm good. Like I'm ready to go. Like I would approve it tonight.
You were ready to go.
I was ready to go.
Last
What
month.
are you ready to
But-
go with?
I'm ready to build a new middle school. Yeah, I'm ready to hire
You mean
KCBA
for phase 1?
and put $50 million into whatever we can get done right now.
Okay.
But
And
I
we're not
also-
quite sure what that $50 million.
No, that'll be an
right?
iterative-
That's
yep.
our next phase.
and we talked
After we
about
make
that too. So
decision.
like,
Okay.
I think that, and I'm not going to speak for Dr. Schaefer, but I think that we're going to, as a board, all we're going to do is hire KCBA and say, hey, we as a board are committed to investing a significant, let's put a dollar amount on it, of money into beginning the construction at the middle school. The process of what that's going to include and Dr. Schaefer has talked to me about this, will be very iterative with each other, with administration, with the teachers, with the students, with the community. And so that'll be a process that continues. But for me, I look at it a little differently. Like we a month and a half ago, we made great progress as a board in the facilities committee meeting, and then as a board when we had that meeting at the high school, where we all pretty much unanimously, I know that Mr. Robeson, was more willing to potentially pursue a referendum, but we were all in agreement that we want to do something very significant, 9 for 9 here at the middle school. And we also didn't want to put all of our eggs just in the middle school because we have 5 other buildings that are in need of a lot of work. So from my perspective, like, I don't want next month to only talk about, like, we need to hire KCBA, we need to start this process. I think that's clear. But I also want to start whatever else we can get done, whatever else we can start. The reason why we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket is so that we can do other things. So we have to only do what we can do. We can't overburden ourselves and administration, but like if there are other things that we can do at the elementary schools, at the high school, then I'm all about trying to start those as well, as long as we can reasonably.
As a point of clarification on what Rod said is, I just want to make sure, like, what you would, in March, the board could vote on an agreement with KCBA to start the design phase. There would be an amount of money associated with that, which are the soft costs, which is not a lot of money compared to the price of the project. I can get you the exact amount. I just don't want to throw out a number, but it's a lower percent. Okay. they would work with everybody, including the board, for a year to design. The board's still not committed to a project. The board, a year later, could say, we've decided not to do it. And you would just eat, you would eat those costs that you paid the construction company. You would not be committed until the bid phase went, decided on a contractors, and sign that. We very well could, the board could decide in March to move forward with KCBA, okay? March of this year. We start rolling around, we get into the fall, and lo and behold, we find out that everything in Shapiro's budget went through. And we have now applied for PlanCon. We'll probably be having a little bit of a different discussion. So I just wanted to make sure, like when Rotse is ready to go, that you're, just so everybody knows, you're not fully committed. I don't want anybody thinking that we're saying, hey, March, we're going to say we're committed to spending $50 million. That's not the case.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
Hang
Yeah.
on, Michelle. Gretchen's had her hand up.
While we're clarifying, I just want to back up to full-day kindergarten, because I know we've had this conversation countless times, just to make sure I understand it. So I think it comes down to two things. We don't have the space and we don't have the funding. We don't have the physical space at the buildings. We don't have the money to maybe put on an addition, to create more classrooms, to physically have full-day kindergarten there, and we haven't been set up to have the funding to pay for 8 to 10 more teachers.
Not without subordinated.
Right. It would,
Right.
our initial projections are 13 new teachers for full-day kindergarten. And then on top of that, I add the 6 full-time that we have to cover for ESSER 3, which brings us up to close to 20, which is $2 million. So now you're looking at getting, surplus to get the debt service, but also surplus to get you another 2 million plus whatever you need to do in the buildings.
I mean, I keep hearing, like, I know a lot of us are saying, like, we want full-day kindergarten. It keeps coming up, but I think at some point we just have to say, have like a line in the sand saying, we just can't afford it, instead of keep saying we're pushing. Because I would love to see full-day kindergarten, but the bottom line is we just haven't been set up at this point,
At this time.
I
So,
mean, you could do it.
That's
Let's
right.
be clear. You could do it.
Right, we'd
You
have
would
to-
just have to
Right,
subordinate.
we'd have
So
to-
we all agree the middle school's first.
Right.
But you basically have to subordinate everything else. You
Yep.
wouldn't do anything at the elementary schools significantly. You wouldn't do anything significant at the high school. You wouldn't do the fields or the extracurricular or the parking lots because it's very expensive to hire
One or the
15
other.
employees. So
Yeah.
it's really
You had
a
your hand
matter
up.
of choice. It's not.
I
Couldn't do
think
it.
we're
That's right.
giving a little cash trap for that, though. I think to say that we could do it tomorrow is a little disingenuous.
We could do what?
Do full day kindergarten.
No, we
tomorrow.
couldn't do it because of the space. That's right.
Well, because of the space and because, we have a budget.
Yeah.
So we don't have that room in that budget.
Well, when I say we could do it, I mean, we could not do the other things that we're talking about and put the money into that. But
Right.
I haven't heard that people.
so it'd be middle school, full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Right.
Middle
Now,
school.
And kind of spread the,
I did want to clarify too, what, when Rod, when you were talking about, we have 90 million, so just to back up again, your summary was excellent. The FM said the amount we could, reasonable people could decide they could afford was 90 million, right? An entire new middle school was 120, I believe. Okay. So there is not a universe in which we can get a new middle school with $90 million. Okay? We are talking about one, bless you, because we decided that to just renovate the middle school was, I want to say mid-80s, give or take, and that's not including any costs that would happen when you rip down the walls and find
Right.
Dante's ninth circle of hell. So we have to be thoughtful that when we can do 90 million, we aren't putting our eggs all in one basket just because we don't want to. It's also because this is the most we can afford to do this much of the middle school. And because we can take out $90 million, it makes sense when you have buildings that haven't been touched since the mid-90s to start to invest in them. I mean, we do not I think, I would be shocked to know that many families in their own homes do not add improvements every so many years, right? Furnace goes, water heater goes, whatever, and invest money in. And we just haven't done significant investments in the 90s. So this is what we're faced with. This is the path that we think moving forward ensures that those schools give us another 20 years at their, it's improved, but still at their level, like still serving the kids at a level that, again, they can be comfortable going to school. Rod, you had said earlier, some of the reasons you decided to join the board. And one of my major reasons was I have children at the middle school. And the feedback that I was receiving, and we talked about this, I think Dr. Shaver brought it up, like whether or not a year ago, 2 years ago, we outperform. We perform very well, right? We had the softball team in earlier talking about the state of their fields, and they're a dominant softball team, right? They're very impressive. It's not so much about what those scores look like. It's about what we owe our children in this district and what they deserve given how well they perform. And I truly believe that they deserve to have a building, that reflects the amount of time they spend in it and how hard they work in it. And so that is why I'm prioritizing the middle school first.
Michelle, you had your hand up.
No, I actually didn't, but, yeah.
We'll pass and let it think about it.
I'm good. I did not.
No, so during the year of planning, we're not just gonna do nothing, correct? So how are we gonna go about deciding on the little projects? Do you know what I mean? So next March, we say, hey, KCBA, we want to start planning a wing for a middle school. But how do we decide on who gets the next carpeting, or what walls get painted, or what stadium gets built, or what field gets turfed? Is that a process? Is that going to be a process that we're going to take on?
I agree with you. I'm certainly for hiring KCBA to start the design on a new middle school, but almost before they did that, I'd like to have them give us that a punch list, and it doesn't have to be dollars, but something such. Here's what they see we need at Waverly. Here's what they see we need at Clark Summit Elementary. Here's what, and so on. And here's the field issue, and try to identify those other projects.
Mhm.
Right? Because we may get down the road and suddenly we don't have enough money to do them all. But I think I'd like to know going in what that work is, because for sure, as you talked about in the facilities committee, you're going to have a period of time when we say to KCBA, okay, go, and they start designing, and it's going to be next year, and then you do bidding and you get government approvals. It may be 2 years before you actually start putting a shovel in the ground outside here.
Mhm.
But what are we doing in the interim?
Yeah, we got to do something.
And I think, it could be we decide to do something at Clark Summit Elementary, or it may be we're going to say, okay, we're going to take some of our money and we're going to put it into the fields and do the softball fields and do all those fields and do a stadium. And now, although that's not the highest priority, now opens up the possibilities of us looking at what do we do with an administration building? Because maybe down the road you say, let's build a small addition on the side of the new middle school for the administration. And that then opens up all kinds of possibilities of what we do with the property in Clark Summit. And I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but I think it's prudent for us to look at that for the community. Just a thought.
I don't want to beat
Sure.
a dead horse, but I just need to talk about the survey that we had and we heard from the community. And I just need to be assured that Abington Heights School District is comfortable and has to accept the fact that we are the only school district in the area that will not have all-day kindergarten. And I just want to make sure we're all comfortable with that and to all of this. And I'm in favor of all of this. I just need to be assured that the heads and all of our professionals are sharing that they are okay with all of this renovation, knowing that we are not affording still the opportunity for 5 and 6-year-olds to be in school all day.
Why wasn't it done before now then? I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I'm, like, now it's a push for it. There's so many things that we need to take care of, right? I mean,
I just,
Never had it.
why hasn't it,
Don't get me wrong,
why wasn't
I-
it done before now?
I just want to be
I
sure.
mean, why is it a
that as-
discussion now?
Do you mean, when you say you want to be assured, would you like us to like go around and say whether or not we would prioritize that ahead of
I just want to hear from Dr.
these
Fisher.
other?
I just want to hear from Chris and Maggie,
I don't know if
who
you're
are the
from board.
academians who
Yeah.
are, I know it's very uncomfortable and I know you'd love to have it, but are we missing a boat by not putting that into this budget?
But wasn't
I
that
missed
float
it.
around
You
for
missed it
20 years
15
that we
years
didn't get
ago.
on?
Well, before I say anything, I know Greg, was-
Greg and
I
Phil
think
want
Greg
to
was
speak.
trying to get in, and Greg, we can't see Greg except for a little circle that kind of, Greg,
His hand's up, isn't it?
yeah, there you go, Greg. We can hear you, Greg.
No, it's perfect. So I think I was going to go in the same direction that conversation just went. I would say, what evidence can we provide that would assure you that we're making the right decision? And then the other question I would have is, other than it's just time to do it, why do we think it's the time to do all-day kindergarten? What is the case there? I understand that it would be beneficial to working parents, but why should that be the priority today?
Phil,
Yeah. So my question is really twofold. So one is to the administrators, is there substantial benefits and value to having full-day kindergarten in terms of educational advancement, social and emotional development, family considerations, individual needs, and just overall quality of education here at Abington Heights? That's what I want to know.
What does family considerations mean?
Work schedules.
you had a second question? Didn't you? There was two.
That's one. And just,
Yeah, I don't think anyone's.
Mrs. Henderson asked a good question, very valid one,
Money to do it.
about, she asked a question about why wasn't it done before? Because I brought this up for years. And that there's two reasons, cost and capacity. Cost and capacity, that's the answer.
Right, you didn't
It's
generate the revenue.
Cost and capacity is the answer.
Yes, but we're doing things now to generate the revenue.
Okay, who's next? Dr. Schaefer, you want to take a stab
I have a
at this or?
Hold on, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So Phil, when you say, what did you, I mean, like previously, I know you brought up a lot of stuff that everybody ignored you about. But like, when you brought up cost, right? Why didn't anybody try to generate revenue then to do it? Why all of a sudden is it today, 2024, 2024, that we have to generate the revenue? I agree, we need all the kindergarten.
Anthony, I'm not going to, don't mean to cut you off, but talking about what happened in the
No, but
past.
I'm asking,
I know,
I'm
I
just,
can answer that.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I don't think it's beneficial. to
It
that.
is.
It is beneficial.
It is beneficial.
All right,
Because
go ahead.
we were very strong in wanting to hear what is the benefits of all-day kindergarten.
Okay,
And Dr. Quinn at the time did a study. And
Dr. Quinn.
He was the
Dr. Quinn was
assistant
our assistant
superintendent.
superintendent. He was, I think, Abington's first assistant superintendent.
correct.
And he was brilliant. He was, and he did a study. And at that time, it actually said that a 5 and 6-year-old's mind had a capacity of retaining for approximately 20 minutes at a time. And the education that Abington Heights was providing at that time was more than sufficient for the 2.5 hours of day a kindergarten class. And so the decision was made for Abington Heights to stay the top educated kindergarten system that we had with the 2.5 hour day that they had. And so we agreed, we accepted that. We accepted that.
So to clarify, what evidence changed from Dr. Quinn's original study?
Thank you.
You're just
That was
asking-
done-
People would still argue
That
that that's
was
sufficient amount
done
of time.
in maybe
He
2000.
he referenced a study done by,
So you're asking
by
if it's
someone.
changed.
I'm asking if it's changed.
You can find a study to prove or disprove any of that.
Well-
You'll find
just wanted to.
tons of
Thank you.
literature on both sides.
I do recall,
So
Mrs. Tierney is correct.
Yeah, we held them to that, and they did it.
She is
They did a
correct at
study
that
for
time.
us. And so we accepted that, you know.
But at that, Mick, at that time, did everybody, I'm asking like a legit question. At that time, did everybody else have all
School
day?
districts were starting, well, at that time, the, what did you call that before the Head Start programs were all starting? And
Okay,
preschools were also starting, but a lot of school districts still had an opportunity to either do a full day or half day. And the second part of the day was more of like a free play babysitting thing. Scranton School District started it.
okay.
So that's why we decided to put our administrators to task and do a study. Because we were thinking all-day kindergarten was really the best thing for our kids. So,
Wait, 10 minutes ago, you were saying that you were pushing for it, like when Mr. Robeson said he was bringing it up.
we were until
But you-
we had them do a study for us. And we realized, okay, our district is doing the best they can for 5 and 6-year-olds at that time. Our culture's changed. That was 10, 12 years ago, 15 years
It
ago.
was.
Our culture's
yes.
changed.
Long time. But getting back to my open question, does the administration, I mean, and you don't have to answer it now because it was kind of a packed question, but in those categories, there are studies. I agree with Mrs. Henderson, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, I dropped it back then to answer Anthony's question, is because there were mixed studies. But is that the case today? I mean, that was a long time ago in this particular time, because if there is no true, because by the way, the opposite end is children that are completely bored by full day kindergarten, right?
It's daycare.
We didn't talk about that. And so I just want to know from professionals, is there value, educational value, social emotional learning value for children, the majority of children, to attend day kindergarten versus the alternative, which is half day? I'm not picking either one. I just don't know.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Dr.
That's for the administration.
I would judge them by their actions, and they have not recommended, I have not heard our administration say to us yet that we should be adding all-day kindergarten before doing any of this other stuff. So I would judge, they can say whatever they want to today, obviously, but their actions have shown that while everybody may want it, they haven't put it ahead of any of these other things we're talking about doing, at least so far. So,
And yet it still doesn't answer the question.
I'll respond, and I'll also, because it's been a minute since I reviewed some of the evidence. However, some of that evidence has not changed, because in some cases it's somewhat like conventional wisdom. It's not surprising to me that I see pushes for all-day K and specifically universal pre-K in areas that do not have the same, what I would refer to as defined as like protective factors, right? So there are associations, and you can take a look at the American Community Study for Abington Heights. We have by far the highest percentage of individuals with degrees, bachelor's on up. And this is something that's in the census that you can see. And there are associations with that. Everything from prenatal care to probability of graduation and post-secondary attendance, right? With that, you also see associations with protective factors relative to academics that are happening in the home. For instance, reading to your children. So when I worked in the school district of Philadelphia, in the office and ran the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, that was something that we had hard data on that we knew was not happening. It was a reason why we wanted universal pre-K and kids to come in, because they needed work with other children, to be read to, hearing what we call academic vocabulary. here, based on the data that I see from the census, our students are more exposed to what I call academic vocabulary. They're going on, places with their parents. They're being read to. They're hearing academic vocabulary. They are coming into school ready to learn and not at a deficit. Okay. And in part, I believe that that's why we see the scores in standard academic assessments that we do. Because by and large, our students are coming from families that value education, right? And they prioritize education. And I can separate that from that full day K. The social emotional piece, as a former counselor, Phil, I would tell you that I would want my kid associating and learning the rules of play, right? I would hope that I'm guilty of it when my kids were young. Like I put an iPad or something. I had something to do. I'm guilty. I'll raise my hand. I did that, right? I'd rather they be on the playground navigating spaces and figuring out how to play freeze tag and the rules. And I don't know if they, playing wiffle ball out there, doing that. So I can't, as a former counselor, say that, they wouldn't kind of advance in that social emotional piece that way. Although I do know from my time here at Abington Heights, we do have a lot of parents that have their students in half day care opposite of that. So the kids are getting that, but at a cost, right? So at the end of the day, I prioritize the buildings because of some of these safety reasons. Because I look at it and say, look, we can't let this go any longer. And once we start to do that, if we realize some more tailwinds, maybe we can make it happen, right? And I said that to Maggie. I said, hey, there could be some ways that we make that happen at a reduced cost, not a zero cost. It's a cost. But that means a lot of redistricting and moving people around, which, it's not as simple as it sounds. But the short answer is that I prioritize getting our buildings where they need to be safe places for all kids to learn, and then coming in on that back end later on to say, how can we realize this?
Yes. Thank you.
It's a good, well thought out answer. That's good.
Good
Yeah,
answer.
thank you.
So not to take this over here, but to your point, Mrs. Henderson, I agree with you. Maybe we shouldn't need to bring this up. I think that we had a good discussion here.
Okay.
Yeah,
If I can just add to that, if you look at our assessment scores, and there's a lot more than just assessment scores, but if you look at our assessment scores, we're at least 10% higher than the state average of districts with full-day kindergarten. So I think that would I love full-day kindergarten? Yes, because only good can come from more instruction and more time of interacting with students. But the data doesn't show that we're falling or failing our students. It shows that we're doing better than the state average in every assessed area, in every grade level, in every test that we give. So I think that's what's really helping Chris and I say, do we need it? Would we love it? Yes. But do we need it? I don't know.
I really appreciate this conversation, and I think it's important for us to let the community know that we take every decision we make to heart and make sure we are going in the right direction. And that's clearly the only reason why I brought this up tonight.
And
I thank everyone, and I thank you for your patience.
to Warren, thanks. To Warren and Anthony's question, because it was a good one about, yes, we need to have a roadmap. However, if we wanted to know where every right and left turn was, we'd be hard pressed to do that within even a year. But and and I've said this to Warren in conversations, because I've looked at this about a million different ways like you have. And what I feel is when the board is talking about multiple projects, if we look at it and just kind of designate percentages or sums of money to say like, hey, we're going to do something everywhere, right? So I've heard, and this is a hypothetical that I'm about to say, all right? Full hypothetical. Like we talked about, hey, you invest $50 million into the middle school, get you a long way, right? But then you've got 4 elementaries and you say, let's do 30 there, 15 at a high school, and then 5 extracurricular. And it just so happens that we were talking about $100 million. So it's a nice round number to talk about percentages. But what I like about that, because this has everything to do with nuance, and I see Mario out there, is it's not about being equal, but equitable. Because when I think about CSE, I tell the board this, think about a high school. Because we may look at South Ave and say, hey, we're going to do light renovations. We're going to make it look new, right? You're not going to get air conditioning, but it's going to look new. And that's going to cost about $7 million. And I know that to be an accurate figure because I've got the numbers, right? But CSC, not so much so, right? CSC is probably around 17 to 18 million. Not because they're getting extra, it's because CSC was a high school and we're talking about 88,000 square feet. So if we earmark some funds and then say, okay, we need to have further discussions, whether that's kind of in the committee or talking with the architects to say, let's try to figure this out. How might we want to do that? Do we want to completely do CSE? Because that's going to impact, it's 2 for 1. You can do light renovations in a CS in South Abington and Newton Ransom, and it costs you the same amount of money as if you did at CSE. Or do you say, look at CSE and say, we're going to do the same amount, and then if we find more funds, and when I say find more funds, I give you an example of if an interest rate drops, or Plan Con kicks in, we can loop around and do some more. But if we try to figure that out by March, I think we're going to be a little more difficult.
My question isn't so much tying down the numbers, but just getting a sense of the size of the issue.
Yeah.
Because I just want to have that in the back of my mind.
I think we hired, from from Mike being at our board meetings, right? We've hired maybe the best in this business. Like, they have a lot of experience doing this with schools. And so, we can pose the question, but I imagine they're going to have this punch list ready for us in terms of priorities, in terms of what we need to be doing. Again, you're talking just health. And when I mean safety, I don't mean necessarily big projects, but safe buildings for both our students and our teachers. And Grace had brought up in the last meeting, like the least disruptive, right? So their plan, will also be dependent on where we can work first and be the least disruptive to the children in their class time.
I think that, exactly. Mike put out, and I asked him for the light renovations because I knew that the air conditioning is a budget buster. You put it there and nothing changes. It utilize all money. So KCBA, and what I appreciate from them is they look at everything with the blinders on. They do not know the local context. We don't ask them to think about that as they put out proposals. So KCBA look at that and say, well, if they were going to prioritize schools, they would say Waverly, because Waverly's the oldest. There's a second floor. It gets really hot because CSC's second floor is sub. That's the one with the least amount of square foot. They'd also look at South Ave and say, that's in a floodplain. We might not want to spend a lot of money there. And I can appreciate that coming from architects, right? So those are, and I don't mean, I'm just throwing that, these are 2, I think, really good examples that we grapple with. I get it. South Abington is in a floodplain. And we're not going to construct a new school like that. We know how much a new school costs. But we still owe it to the kids to do work there. How much, where, that's to be determined by the professionals in the building as we work with them and set some guardrails, right? The question would be about Waverly. Are we comfortable with the size right now? Or do we want to put more money in it? So these are like the questions that kind of come to us that we have to mediate from, from them.
Just, because this is a really good discussion. It sounds like, in reality, this is going to be a portfolio of a number of projects. And that's fine. I think getting to that point is really good. Now, within that, though, I'm assuming we want a balanced portfolio of things that improve academics, things that improve athletics, things that are short-term, things that are long-term. And then there are things between, because the long-term things, there's designs, there's development, there's all this other stuff. Just even getting permits and things like that, that's going to take a lot of time. In the meantime, and this goes to Anthony's question, which was a very good one. How do we prioritize the things we can do today?
Right.
And there are methods, like the thing that comes to mind is the weighted shortest job first, where you take the things with the most value that could get done the quickest and do those. The challenge is, how do we apply value to these things? KCBA is maybe looking at it from a particular perspective, but as board members, we may value things a little differently. So I would caution just saying, KCBA, give me your punch list and do that. I mean, but I don't want to micromanage it either. Like, I want to give the administration the ability to get going with this stuff. Because once these funds are released, to Anthony's point, I think what you were saying, and I agree with it if you were, and that is do the most highest value things that we could do quickly. And that would be a good start, I think. Does that make sense in terms of the balanced portfolio, or do we want it? And it's an open question. I'm not trying to gear. Is it 80% academics and 20? Do we have an idea?
Yeah, I do. Like some of the things that we talked about, and I'm going to resend that out to everybody, because where I got these numbers about, it's around $7 million in elementary school, with the exception of CSC to do a light renovation. And I'm going to send this out because, to your point, I thought about the academics, and I asked Mike to give us a base model. And I said, redo every single library media space in every elementary. If we're talking about it at the high school, to create a space, everybody says STEM, it doesn't need to be STEM, robotics, it's a design space for kids. I want it, I see it being full and exciting and transformative, that a lot of things can happen in that space, but kids using it. Every elementary should have that. And that's around $1 million, so that was on that academics, right? And then you look at, take out the carpet, put in floor. That's safety, right? The lights, all of that, and getting that mix in there. So when we started to look at prioritizing it, we know that the middle school is priority one, but you know what? That's a year of design, right? The elementary schools are still going to take some design, but not a year, right? So when we would work with KCBA, if we wanted to start off and we decided on a elementary, doesn't matter. Most likely we could get that started sooner rather than later. Included in this, if let's just say, for instance, we've talked about the stadium and the stands. I've got a quote for that because we did that before. That's about a $900,000 project to add 1,800 new stands on our side, and then 500 stands on the visitor side, a new press box. We get all our kids in there. That would probably be one that could go first. Even though I said to you as an example, like prioritizing it, only because of the amount of time it takes to prep. Same thing with any field work. You've already got a contract with Quad 3. They've already done the work at the track. They are familiar with it. I've talked to the Land Conservation District. So they're familiar with the work. They're familiar with all the vendors. They've already told me that DEP won't be involved. It's them. So that would be a project would be ready to go first. And by no means am I saying I'm putting athletics in front of academics. What I'm doing is just saying, hey, if this one's ready to go first, let's do that so we clear space for the big stuff that's coming on.
That's really
Like
speaking to Phil's point.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the elementary an elementary may come on, and that may be summer work. And we work with KCBA to say, hey, that may be 2 summers. The idea there is, let's not disrupt the kids. We're going to go in, we're going to do the carpeting we're going to do the lighting, and we'll defer to them. We'll talk to KCBA and say, maybe they come back and say, look, we really think you can save some money if we do 2 elementary simultaneously, because we can save some money on scale. We're going to order twice as much flooring, twice as much lighting.
So given that, what does a contract you would envision with KCBA really look like? I mean, on one hand, the heavy lift is the middle school. But you don't want them to forget all that other stuff that we want to kind of queue up or put. So does that contract with them say, all of the above? Does it, how will you sort this out?
So the agreement that we would put would be, let's just say, I'm looking at a draw schedule that he sent me, the one that gave me agita. The first one would be, and this is, again, hypothetical. The middle school and Waverly, so their agreement would be they're starting to those design work, together. And then let's say we decided we're going to do the high school next. That would be an addendum to it. So maybe a year later, they start the design work on that. And then a year later, they may start the design work on CSE. And with each one that you add, more money comes out. And that's the draw schedule. And that's what PFM will see. Because as we start to choose these projects, then we start to see the draw schedule, and they come back and say, okay, this looks like it's going to be $90 million over the course of the next 6 years. And what we are advising you to do is go 10 million. This is our 10 million, 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, 10 million. That's what their job is to do, is to advise us to say how much we need to take out and when we need to take it out in order to achieve our goals, so that we are paying the minimum amount of debt service needed versus saying, oh, let's just take out $90 million right now. Because we're not doing $90 million work in a year. Does that make sense?
It does. So with them, it's all dependent on when we are scheduling these projects. That's when we would go. So we wouldn't do this 90 million all at once.
No, exactly.
However,
And what if and then maybe possibly we won't need it all, or maybe we will have to go, the other way. So it's all done in stages for the draw that they're receiving for our project.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is we're going to come back and talk about this probably 100 times, because we're going to take out one bond and it's going to be at this interest rate. And then we're going to take out another one, God willing, it's at a lower interest rate. And then we're going to take out another one and maybe it's even lower. So that's going to change the draws. That's going to, and it may change our thinking. It may change our order. Am I answering that question?
You're doing perfect. Keep going. You're doing a great job here.
Right, we'll have, so we can draw off on our debt also, right? We will have a sinking fund too. So we can draw off this debt after we, start taking out all this debt. We'll also be able to pay off, more of the debt with extra funds that we are bringing in?
Yeah, so, or like, is that more like a positive arbitrage?
Well,
No, you can't do that. The debt's not prepayable if it's 10 million or under for 5 years, and if it's over 10 million for 10 years. So you can't take extra capital and prepay the debt without defeasance.
The investors want their money.
When's that debt callable?
When the debt's callable, you can do that.
You can do it when
But you
it's
could
when the
change
debt's
your
called.
tax.
No, when it's callable.
Yeah.
So like
Call-
debt, when you issue the debt, you have to guarantee basically the people that buy the debt that they're going to get their interest for 5 years.
Yeah.
If it's a 10 million or less deal. If it's over 10 million, you have to guarantee them for
So
typically 10.
they'll try to get us,
So you can't sweep, it's not like a
What
house.
may
where you
happen,
Pay off your mortgage,
Right,
you can't
you
do
can't do that. You
that.
can't
Not
do
until
that.
it's called.
Oh,
what may happen as hopefully we get tailwinds,
yeah.
that will then improve the basic operating budget of the district, and we may start to see surpluses.
Right.
In which case, we will then have the choice in those surpluses of doing more work or just,
Yep.
I mean,
which is what we did, which is what the district did before. So
Yep.
it will be, what PFM will advise first is probably to take out $10 million, because as Rod said, we've got a 5-year call. And so we'll be able to refinance, they'll use the term refund, but refinance that in 5 years. But then when we get out, when we're talking about multiple projects, we may take out 20, 25 million.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but those are 10-year calls, right?
On the
The largest.
So
25
if it's
million?
over $10 million, it's typically sold to what's called the bond market, not the bank market. And those investors want 10 years.
Yeah, so we won't be able,
We won't, okay.
right.
Emily,
If we were to get a surplus in the budget, which would be ideal, if you look on PFM's sheet where they had all those colored columns,
Mhm.
the millage rate goes up to help us pay off the debt. And it goes up pretty high in those last 2 years. And so that would be advantageous for the taxpayers.
Exactly.
Have to
Right.
draw.
Exactly.
And when you look at the table that PFM puts in, like when they did, this is what it would look like if you go back and look at like 10 million, 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, $6,547. Because what they're doing is they're saying, okay, these surpluses, any surplus, we're putting it over into cap reserve.
Right.
And your cap reserve grows, and then the last bond you take, we're going to try to take it for the least amount of money. And to Phil's question before, we're going to be like, wait a minute, we're not going to exhaust our cap reserve. We want to have a rainy day fund.
Right.
What are we comfortable with? So, you may say 8 million because we want to keep, some million in there.
if I'm not mistaken, the PFM study actually said if we really wanted to be aggressive, we could go to 120 million. But I think everybody said, you're really putting yourself on the line there if
You're in a bad, yeah.
you're in a bad spot if something happens.
I just had one more thing. One of the things that we are doing when you dissected the numbers, and you said like the round number of 100 million,
Yeah.
right? And you said we allocate this much to the middle school, this much to each elementary, this much to extracurriculars. One thing we don't want to do, right, is kind of fly by the seat of our pants as we get these projects. And so I understand the punch list questions, but I think having that ballpark figure
Yes.
is a strategic budget strategy moving forward to say, okay, we can do the stadium seats because it's 1 million out of this, I forget what the numbers are
Yes.
exactly, but like 5 million that we've allocated to athletics. And as we, do like you said about the weighted item.
Shortest job first.
Shortest job first, right? So we can do those jobs, but we have a budget strategy for the next 5 to 10 years to say, okay, well, we're starting to hit close to our athletic. We got done all these jobs, great, because they're short. But we know that we're going to hit our limit here, and we're going to want these. We don't want to do any more in that realm because we want to make sure we have the 10 million for the elementary.
So when you laid out the thing that gives you agita.
Yeah.
So like when you were saying that on that initial agita spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It was sequenced by school.
Yep.
And I haven't talked to KCVA about this. So is it their vision that these light renovations would be done exclusively by school, or are there cost efficiencies to having, because there's lots of overlap here. There's lots of different subcontractors. You have one subcontractor that's going to do all the boilers in 5 schools. Like, is it possible that it's not
Yeah.
sequenced that way?
Yeah, so what he had, and I understand why he did it this way, like what he'd been in this proposal, he had Newton Ransom and South Abington running simultaneously. Both of those were 7.1 and 7.3. Clark Summit was starting like a year before. That was at 18. And that project is, the duration is about a year longer than the other two because it's such a big school. They both finish at the same time, but they need like another year on it. Right?
Is that 18 at CSE? That does not include moving walls and redoing the entrance? That's just the other stuff? Or is
Yeah,
that-
because everything that we see on the proposals is like a square foot figure. If I go back at it, it's like 88,000 square feet. And Waverly, like when you take a look at that, like that's 19,000 square feet.
Right.
So it just adds up really
So that
quick.
is- but that's not moving those walls.
Right. It's just a lot.
But, to your point, I mean, logically, one would think that if you're going to do HVA system or mechanical systems,
Right.
probably a better term, in 5 buildings, it probably makes sense to say, let's issue an RFP for 5 of them. Maybe they're scheduled out over 3 or 4 years, but theory is you should get a much better price for 5.
They're not going to bid it unless they can do it all at once though. Like if you're a contractor.
Well, I don't know.
They got the risk of the.
I don't know.
And the costs.
If I were a contractor, certainly like to have the
Yeah.
work scheduled.
And that's a great question for when we
Over
go,
5 years.
our
It's a
next.
question for Casey.
Yeah, right. Our next open session is at Waverly, right? And I just random elementary school. And so this is great that we can say to Mike, like, okay, I'm going to ask him to, do another draw schedule for all of us again. But I'm going to ask him to make it a little longer out instead of 4 years. And we can take a look at that and ask that exact question, because it's a great question. Like, will you put all these bids out at one time, right? Because is it the same contractor and subs? And they're just bidding all this knowing that the next 5 years, they're just doing elementary schools. That's what they're doing. That's their work for 5 years. And that's what Mike would tell you, that why he doesn't necessarily, in his words, worry about it, because it's predictable, good work.
Yeah. But and the other thing you can do when you do that is you're talking about lighting. Well, if you set a standard, say, okay, this is the light fixture we're going to design around.
Yep.
So now you have, 5,000 light fixtures you go out on bid with.
Yeah, get a discount.
Put them in a warehouse.
Who knows?
Any space?
Who knows? But I mean,
And
yeah,
then-
that could talk about, you're
Absolutely.
talking about projects that you can drive costs down. So this is the type of thing you can do that.
Hopefully their products are available.
Well, sure.
too. Question.
Yep.
In your facilities meeting, you talked about the administration building. And I know, that that's a work in progress, but if that is
eventually
moved out of the district, where would you put central office?
So
Is there thoughts of a central?
Yeah,
office?
I've talked with Mike about it, because as I'm trying to do some due diligence about who we need to bring in to, provide us the right information so we make a good decision. I'll first say that when I think about that central office, there are people that work in the central office that could be based in schools. And there are people that could not be based in schools, okay? And Mike, along with probably any reasonable person, will tell you, well, Chris, it's probably easier to go find a place and renovate it than it is to build new. Why would you sell that for random number, $4 million, and then go build something for $4 million? So great point. So that's something that, as I look around, Jim, I've been talking with Jim Mirabelli about that. So we'll start to do some work so we can come back to you to say, hey, I talked with Maggie. We really thought about it. This is really the number of people that we would need space for, right? And if our goal is to sell the 11 acres on Clark Summit and Clark's Green and use that money to build, then we want to allocate the least amount of money to finding a place to put the central office. Like, I don't need any, like, a special place. I just need Wi-Fi, right? People can find me to yell at me, and in one of 6 buildings around the district, right?
Well, you know, the old.
I just keep on moving.
The old planetarium at the high school was the school
Yeah.
board meeting.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
Planetarium.
that's an option. And what I didn't say, but I had a conversation about before, and it is a reason why I'm looking for attorney to advise us this way, is I believe that the board, in the event we landed in a spot where we said it would be advantageous for the whole district if we sold this so that we can really improve our facilities, okay? That the board could have a say on the parameters by which the building, that land, is sold. And what I mean by that is to say, like, look, we believe in the community. We are an absolute vital piece of the community. We want to contribute to the development of the community. And by that, the board can say, hey, look, we're not just going to put it up so somebody from New York can come in here and just put up some housing. It's important that some green space be donated to the community so the community has access to that, to have some mixed use for residential, to have a healthcare facility. I mean, these are random thoughts, but that's something that the board has control over. You could say, look, we want space there for nonprofits. So some of the nonprofits within the community have a place, right? I mean, these are all things worthy of consideration when you look at that.
Good conversation.
But they'll have to replace the chili.
Okay.
Please.
Please, we really appreciate it.
And any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I have, just before we adjourn, I'm not the longest serving person on this board. Mrs. Tierney is. I don't understand how she's so much younger than I am. But in any case, I just want to say that, when this group, this board and this administration kind of came here, there were quite a number of, I don't want to say hidden issues, but issues that had been moved down the line. I think of some of the real estate tax appeals. I think of some of the curriculum things, and certainly this facility study. And I just want to compliment this group on dealing with these issues on a heads-up fashion, and dealing with the facilities in really a thoughtful manner. You are all making Abington Heights better for this community, and Abington Heights is better for you all being here, and I mean all of you. So thank you very much. As not the longest serving person, but close to. So thank you very much. And with that, I'd call for an adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you very much.
This is the